Welcome to the show.
Hi.
What is the how does someone spot a charlatan, fraudster, scammer of that nature in the world of what you do with intuition? There's a lot of scammers and fraudsters and charlatans. And the reason you're on the show is because you're not one of those people. So, how does someone determine the difference between this is a good person of the light with intuition or woo woo or however you want to bracket what you speak to versus someone who's maybe not so much of the light?
Good question. Some of the things that I'll share with you today are, going through my own hero's journey. And in that process, whatever journey you're on, there's going to be tricksters, right? Whether you're a spiritual person or a business person. And so some of the same tells are there for the spiritual world as it is for any other path. But the spiritual world is so much more intimate, and that's why it's important to be cautious. You're When you're opening up to somebody energetically and sharing your subconscious innermost thoughts, you're trusting on a whole other level. And so, yeah, I think in general, this is a very important question, especially today as there are less and less um, experiences where we grew up with somebody and know them, and now more than ever with social media we have to use our own instincts and intuition to gauge, if somebody's safe or not safe. And so I'm going to give you, there's so many, but I want to give you a few to start with. Number one, I would say it's less of a fraudster energy, but I would say unstable. To look out for people who are presenting mental illness and instability. And they might be in a transformative process themselves, but they haven't come all the way through it, or they're in a place where they're still in their own crisis, and yet they're trying to teach or share with others. And so if you notice signs of instability, it's important. I'm not going to judge this person, but I would say it's like getting on a roller coaster that might break. So you want to pull back and don't get on that ride if you notice that somebody's presenting instability. So that's number one. Okay. Num Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and well, presenting instability. So online, there's a lot of hoopla online. So what are the hallmarks of presenting instability online? If for people who are a slow learner.
Well, online, I'm not sure, but I
Okay.
know when I meet somebody, I observe their body language. That's one
Okay. So,
thing.
so you
So,
address it more when you get a chance to meet them. You're looking at it.
yeah, because when they're online, they might be a good actor. They might be presenting in a certain way. They might have a really nice outfit. They might be really good with the camera, and you might be drawn to that. But you can usually tell in one session or in a conversation pretty quickly when you're with somebody if they're presenting signs of instability. So here's a couple. One, they're putting themselves in a position of grandiose persona in the human story. Okay. I am so important. And there's some kind of maybe really out there concept that they're presenting where in that myth that they've created for themselves, they are super important. Okay. So that's number one. Number two is a lot of rapid speaking to the point where you almost can't follow.
Mhm.
Shifting eyes, somebody usually who's pushing something that makes you feel really uncomfortable in your own body. So it might be like, oh, you need to come do DMT with me and then let me open your sexual chakras. And you're like, whoa, 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 this is nuts.
Leave my sexual chakras alone.
Right, and I'm not gonna jump into doing something that's unsafe. So in the spiritual world, a lot of times there are things that spiritual teachers might ask you to do that are a natural part of the reconstruction process. So for example, I worked with shaman for a year, and a common practice that we worked with was fasting. Okay. And I trust this person because they have deep roots. They're well known. I could tell right away by speaking with the person that he was the real deal and I trusted my intuition. However, it's also important, and this is number two, to be able to say no. So I knew for myself that the level of fasting that might be required for this program was not good for my body. And I said no. So if you say no, and they're pushing back on that, somebody who's forcing boundaries past your boundaries on an issue when you've put up clear boundaries, that's another sign of, I would say, some unstable psychology. Okay. Another one is of instability is that a lot of times a person is doing overuse of hallucinogens. And, I'm not in that world, but I have a lot of friends and fellow practitioners that are, and there's safe ways to do that. There's unsafe ways to do that. But if somebody is sort of like a dealer, and they're doing hallucinogens constantly, and you can just tell that they're not grounded in their center, they're not grounded in their presence, they're not grounded in their being. And if they're doing something that just seems really unusual to you, you got to like listen to that gut reaction and those signals for yourself. Okay. So, look, we all have our own personal stories and myths that we might present, and some of them are more, maybe fantastical than others. And stories are important. A myth is an important part of our belief structures. But the story should be a medicine story. It should be a story about healing, about bringing peace, about bringing centeredness, about helping give you something that you walk away with where you can do that for yourself. So, another one is you need me to get to that place of peace, or you need to sign up for my way of thinking or my way of being in order to get to your peace, instead of, hey, here's some tools for you, here's some ways you might do this. I want to empower you, so you want to watch out for cult leaders, and those are sometimes harder to spot. So we're shifting out of unstable now into
Okay,
cult
we're going
leaders.
on a journey. We're
Yeah.
going from instability to cult leaders. So
Right.
if
And
you're
so
yeah, I mean, that's an interesting segue to me, so I'd love to hear. It's a topic, there's all these Netflix documentaries, people watch this stuff and you can be hyper vigilant, but you can also be educated around it. So it's like trying to strike that balance, right? Of what are we looking for? How do we prepare? How do we be discerning without being overly anxious and,
yeah,
things like this.
yeah, overly anxious or judgmental, sometimes we have to have an open mind.
So when it comes to cult leaders,
Yeah, when it comes to cult leaders, usually you'll notice that again, there's this elevated sense of importance. My way is the way. That's the first thing. If you have to give over something that is really uncomfortable for you to sacrifice, whether it's too much money or again, they're asking something from you that doesn't feel right to your system. Be careful of that. Somebody that is elevated to a status of a miracle worker, right, where they're like, I'm doing this miracle for you rather than empowering you to do those things for yourself. If they are grooming people that have a lot of money. So if you notice, you might go to an event and that cult leader will be trying to one sit at the head of that situation, and they will be trying to break down your own voice or your own way of thinking or your own constructs and then reconstruct your psychology to their thinking, taking away your autonomy. And then within that, there's usually a couple people that they want to extract from, that they might want to groom, right? That will be supporting them energetically or supporting them financially or the prettiest person in the room. Whatever it is that they're trying to get, you'll start to notice that something feels off about that. And there'll usually be some kind of huge construct around them. So again, a chain around people's neck, sort of like how MLMs sucks you in and you can't get out. Like, okay, I'm just going to buy this one vitamins. What's the harm? But then all of a sudden you're sucked into this thing that you can't get out of. And that is definitely a sign of a cult situation. So one example that I would say, I have a really close friend who
That's
was
one
sort
reason
of
I don't wear that's one reason I don't wear flamboyant accessories, right? It's just like
oh, look, costumes are an interesting thing, right? Like if a business person is wearing a really nice suit, that's a costume. We all wear
right.
them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a good business person. And, for example, again, with some of the people that I've studied with who are indigenous, costume was a very important part of the cultural story, or there's symbolism to the costume. There is even certain ritual to the costume that was very significant. So, it's okay if somebody feels nice in a flamboyant outfit. That's their costume. The important part is to be able to look past that costume with your intuition, because everybody's wearing one, right? We're all presenting ourselves in a certain way. And so it's like, okay, I'm going to not assume that just because this person's wearing a nice business suit, or, a cultural outfit or really beautiful clothes, that they're automatically wonderful or they're automatically in the position that they're claiming to be in. So again, how is your intuition reacting to this person? Gosh, there's so many. Another one might be the I would call them a sort of predator, like energy predators in the mystical world. And do you leave that interaction feeling more energized, more clear, more like, wow, I can hear.
Do you feel more mystical or more robbed and preyed on?
Right, or wait, I just listened to an hour of their drama on their podcast. Like, did I want to hear that of all about their drama, you know?
I know.
Or or did I come away with some kind of really great tool for myself to take home, or some great information? So those people that just need a lot of attention and want to suck all the energy, I would say just be careful of that.
A lot of it like energetic level, meaning maybe they do things that you can analytically describe, but it
Mhm.
seems like a lot of what you're describing is more of a feeling. Do you feel like they're giving energy? Do you feel like they're taking something from you that you can't afford to give them? Just or, how are they preying on you? Is it a fair energetic exchange? Is it more,
Mhm.
more of like a grandiose hand wavy bullshit? So yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting to assess it not just from like a articulate level, but sort of how are you feeling when you're around them and things like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's do you want me to keep going through the other types, or do we want to go into the intuitive tells?
Let's do two more types and then the tells because there's so much
Okay.
goodness. I got so many questions for you. Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. So, one thing I would say is the young mystic, right? So, I'm definitely not stigmatizing youth. I have a wonderful qigong teacher who is younger than me and brings so much insight and inspiration. However, he's really honest with his experience level. He's not there projecting this authority over me, or projecting like that I'm so much more advanced than I actually am, right? So we would come into class and he'd say, "Hey, this is my education level. This is where I'm at in my journey. We're all doing this together." And so when a young person is first starting out on their mystical journey, they might go to like a weekend workshop, or now retreats are really popular, or at one training, and then all of a sudden get really juiced up and inspired and decide, you know what, I'm ready to hold people in an experience. And it's like, You know what? Maybe not. Maybe you've gotta know how to create a safe system. It's good for people to have, the wisdom of elders, and I think sometimes in our culture, we're attracted to the thing that's young and pretty, but are we remembering the value of our elders? And so youth is brings inspiration, it brings new ideas, it brings new perspective,
Crypto
and
brings in cryptocurrency.
stay away from that. But sure, exactly, like new concepts, right? But then the age brings in wisdom. And so I think they've walked through all those experiences. And so I think there's just being aware of where that person is on their journey and what them being honest with their experience level is really important. And I've noticed that a lot online, right? Like people projecting something out there that they're not quite ready for. And it's maybe not safe for some of the people that are really seeking and needing deep support. So,
So that's one.
mhm. Yeah. So we've got we went over cult leaders, we went over unstable people who are unstable, the mystical predator. And I think the self-appointed shaman is also in there, or the self-appointed healer. And again, the dealer, someone overusing hallucinogens. Uh, so, yeah, there's simple ways to do this with somebody who might be presenting something that they're not ready for or that they're not is, check the testimonials. They shouldn't have a giant track record of disaster behind them. So if you got to be careful of mob mentality. That does happen occasionally, but in general, the things that other people say about this person, you're going to get this feeling of safety and warmth that they're emitting. Oh, so and so is awesome. Oh, I love that person. I had such a great experience. It's not going to be like, well, be careful, So there shouldn't be this string of disaster behind them. Look at how they're living their life. So if you're, going to somebody for a certain thing, they should be able to walk the talk. They should be doing the things that they're preaching about or giving you. So, for example, if I were wanting relationship coaching, I wouldn't go to someone who has disastrous relationships. I would go to somebody who's experienced a healthy relationship and been through maybe they've been through a couple of their lessons, but now they're good. And so, how is this person living their life? Are they living a good life? And that's another thing that's hard to tell when you're looking online. Like, how do they live? So, if you look at their website or whatever they have out there, there should be something about them that expresses who they are and how they're living. Right? Are they
Don't hire
being
her. Don't
what?
hire a don't hire a.
Kind of. Hey, I gotta get healthy. You know,
Yeah.
it's not gonna work.
You gotta look for the walk the talk factor,
Yes, walk the talk
right?
factor. So if I tell people, "Hey, you should do qigong," I better be doing qigong.
Yeah, which I have taken up and I'm loving it. Thank you for.
Yeah, great.
Okay, so what was the next one? It tells what's the next piece you wanted to get on? And
Yeah.
also, I wanted to ask you, how did you get into the like, how did was to the extent you want to share your story, how did you get so deep and proficient in this mystical world?
Boy.
You can do the short version if you like, or the no version. Skip that question. Where's the skip
Uh,
button? Like, you can fast forward, like, when you're listening to a song, you just, like, skip the song. You can do that if you want.
it's a long story, my biography, but um I'm I would say I've always been artistic, creative, and intuitive. It's just my nature. But as far as doing it is work, I started getting into this path a little more around the age 19. And I would say I'm a seeker, I'm somebody who wanted to leave the conditioning that I was raised with. Even though my mother had given me some early intuitive training as a child, as far as like belief structures and spiritual beliefs, I wanted to sort of venture through all the paths and see what was out there. In that journey, I worked at a healing center, a biofeedback center a while ago, and one of the women there noticed my intuition, and she started testing me. She started doing different things with me to be like, sort of like, "Sweetie, you have a gift. Why aren't you using this to help people?" And I had already gotten into tarot and other sort of mystical arts. I was already there at that point. And so she really encouraged me to start helping people. And for about 10 years, I traded. I would do intuitive sessions with people. I tried different ways of doing it. And I really wasn't ready to take money in my 20s. I didn't feel quite ready for that. So that's how I learned. And then in my mid 30s, you could say I had a calling to step more deeply into this work and to make it my full-time profession. And by that point, I was fairly well practiced and started working out of a local tea house in the area doing tarot spreads for people. And it just grew from there. So, it's something that I was born with and then grew over the years. And I've had many different teachers in many different areas, and I would say that nobody's perfect. And that was the other thing that I was thinking about a lot this week is, as we're going into the spiritual world and, trying to find different teachers, I was going back over all of mine and none of them are perfect. So it's also our job to not idealize our teachers. Those human flaws that they have shouldn't be so drastic that they're causing harm, but everybody's human, you know? And some of those teachers were so imperfect in so many ways. And I look back and go, oh gosh, what was I thinking? I should have been more careful there. However, maybe I met my best friend. Or I should say, I did meet my best friend in one of those scenarios. So sometimes it's not just about this linear way of thinking, like, that person's good, that person's bad. That's where our intuition really comes in this journey, is to say it's to help give us a navigation tool for our own higher guidance, right? Okay, so going back into, when I was 19 and seeking and looking for the right teachers, and I've had many teachers. Now looking back, I would say I would tell myself, don't put anybody on a pedestal. And, all human beings are imperfect.
I
And
noticed.
it's, yeah, it's important. Every teacher I've had is imperfect. And so, but those imperfections shouldn't be something that creates harm. Those imperfections should be things that are, like we all have our quirks, and that's the difference between what we tolerate and our deal breakers. And so, deal breakers should not be in a relationship intimately, and they should not be in a relationship with a spiritual guide or teacher either. Okay. So as I go back and think about all the teachers I have, I say, but would I have changed that experience? Would I have not, okay, that was challenging. Would I have not done that? And that was something I had to ask myself. And the truth is, I probably still would have walked in that door because, let's say, for example, I met my best friend, through a situation with the teacher that I had that had some of these smoke and mirrors we're talking about. Right.
Right.
And now me and my best friend kind of like laugh at some of these things that we went through together. Right. So we have to be careful of getting so linear with this that we forget to engage with what our higher self and our own intuition is telling us about a door that we may want to walk in or not walk in. Okay. And so if you can arm yourself with your boundaries, with your deal breakers, with your red flags, but also be aware that there are some doors we're meant to walk in for some other reason. That's where the intuition says, gives us a clue about our own navigation in our our life's journey, right? So, yeah, and I can say that safely with every single challenging teacher that I've had, that I walked away with something beautiful and valuable. I walked away with some lessons, and I walked away also with something wonderful that I was supposed to learn or someone I was supposed to meet through that experience. And I've been fortunate enough to have fairly good boundaries with those people. Like I never fully drank the Kool-Aid with whatever they were. Maybe somebody else had a situation that was more challenging with them, but I've witnessed a lot of it. Now it's my job as a someone older saying, what would I have wanted to tell myself when I was 19 going out into the spiritual seeking and developing of my own intuition? And it's to really learn the difference in the subtle qualities of the intuition. And so I want to go over this little system that I've developed for people.
Please.
uh, yeah, about what is intuition. We all say, okay, listen to your intuition, but that can be tricky. What does that mean? And so I call this system the four eyes. And you've got true intuition, right? The letter I, intuition, with illusion. And being able to tell the difference in your own system between those two things. So that's the first two. The second two is instinct, right? Which is a sort of like that gut reaction versus impulse. So sometimes I've noticed when I'm teaching people intuition or when I'm working with a client that they're really on more on the spectrum of impulse and illusion than they are on the spectrum of instinct and intuition. And they'll say, "Oh, I just, here's a popular one, but I just know that this person is my soulmate." Right? Okay. That's an illusion.
Man, you just broke a lot of hearts.
I'm not saying soulmate energy, whatever you're defining that as, doesn't exist, but most of the time, there's a story that we're telling. And so the important part of this, there's several parts. The first is if you're developing your intuition, to start tracking the proof. Okay, so here's proof. Someone says, I heard this voice or had this feeling that I shouldn't get on that plane, and then the plane crashed. How did that feel in your body when that happened? How did that, like, okay, that was true. Something told me not to do that, and I listened, and that was true. How did that actually feel in your system? Okay, so at the beginning or the opening of my retreats, I'll go around a circle and we'll share the different types of stories that we've all experienced. I just knew I was supposed to call my best friend and they were going through something, and I called them, and right in that moment they needed me. There was
And
proof, okay? Or I just know, I just had this sense that come over me that this is what I needed to do, and then you observe that and it turns out, okay, that was the reason. This was correct. So that's called, tracking. If you track your intuitive experiences that were proved right, and then over the years, you start to develop this language with your own system that helps you to understand how your own body it translates these intuitive signals, right? So that's number one. That's intuition. Illusion is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the other word for that is story, right? Are we creating a story or projecting a story onto something? But there are these different types of stories, right? There's factual stories. Hey, this actually happened. There's medicine stories, which a lot of healers will use, even in tarot. If you tell someone a story that's medicinal for them, that's very helpful. Is it a belief story? You could say astrology or any type of constructed belief, that's still a belief story, right? Dream or fantasy story. We might have night dreams, daydreams. We have manifestation stories where we like create a story and then we, draw that vision into reality and create it, right? That's a really beautiful way to envision our lives. We have fear stories, right? That's the anxiety. Oh my
and then
gosh, this is going to happen.
manifested rose-colored Bose headphones.
Yeah, exactly. I did. Yeah. There's terror stories, like people who go into extreme terror, and then there's also delusional stories, and those are the ones you really have to watch out for. And I've run across people who, when I was talking about unstable energy, people
Mhm.
who are seers or saying that they're seers, or saying that they're shamans, or saying that they've got this method, but then they're projecting these delusional or harmful or fear stories. Like, a reader should never tell you you're going to die, or you're going to get sick, or this horrible thing is going to
It should
happen.
always be empowering. That's an interesting one actually, like, 'cause I did a reading with you, and I find that to be an interesting let's sync on that one for a second. Um, on one hand, to your point, why it's not helpful to have someone sort of give you disempowering information, but is there any nuance to that? Because some truths are inconvenient or, you know, not what you wanna hear, but maybe it's like a bitter pill that you wanna be forewarned about, or, like, how do you think about
Okay, yeah. Here's an example. As an experienced reader, reading for now over about 30 years, there is a subtle art between giving someone the truth about what you're feeling and reflecting their truth back to them, or um, creating a negative fear story. Okay, so an inexperienced reader, for example, might get a negative card, like the death card, let's say, and say, "Oh, you're gonna die," right? Or they might get
that sucks?
Or they might get a card that represents struggle and say, "You're gonna get sick." You don't do that. Those cards have medicines to them. They have their own story to them. So the death card could be about the subjects of death, like, hey, there's a transformation here, there's change, there's something that you're releasing and something that you're bringing in, or it's an opportunity to talk about people who have already passed and your emotions around that, or if you have an ancestor that's already in that death process and it needs to be talked about. Like, there's so many ways to work with that death card rather than this negative prediction. But if somebody is coming to me and there is sort of this way that they might be masking their own truth or not seeing something that is dangerous, then there are times where I have to be very careful about that, sort of using it's that gray area where you have to
Right.
use discretion to say, "Hey, you might want to take a second look at this, or there might be some illusion here, or yeah, maybe it's not what you thought it was, and maybe it's not what you're desiring. What you're desiring isn't actually what's going to happen, and there's a reason for that." So it's subtle, and the trickiest one that I get is sometimes people call me and they're like, "Is my partner cheating on me?" And I'm like, "I really don't like that question." I don't want to accuse somebody that I don't know of something that they did or didn't do. That's not what I'm here for. But I might be more like, "Well, what can we talk about why you don't trust this person?" Maybe that's a more important question.
Yeah, I see that as a ethical, philosophical gray area.
It is.
It also depends on how in my mind, it depends on how confident you are in your reading, because if you have a false positive, meaning, yes, he or she is cheating on you, but that happens to be false, like, so it depends. I can see it a function of how accurate is your reading, as well as is it in their highest good to hear that? I mean, that's a tricky one. That's a
It's a
tricky
tricky
one because
one. It's
people are
yeah.
dealing with all sorts of that's where the term tough love comes in, right? Like, there are things that we don't wanna hear that I have family members lined up out the door, self-appointed, to tell me to give me the tough love, right? So there's certain things that, you know, people think you need to hear, and sometimes there's validity to that. That's such a moving target because sometimes you should hear it, but you're not ready for it. Maybe you are ready for it, but you might not actually be the person delivering the news might not be, like, on 1,000% solid ground, for me to say, "Oh, this person's not good for you." If I'm gonna say that, I have to be beyond a shadow of a doubt positive.
Right.
I don't know, I just see it as a bit of a moving target. That's a really
Yeah.
tricky one.
That's why don't do it if I can avoid that. Or I'll say, "Look, I could be wrong here, this is not what I'm here for. So that's not what my sessions are about." And sometimes I'm like, "Hire a private investigator if you're really that worried." You know, but I would wanna focus more on the what's behind that and, what's underneath of that fear. And really, again, going to someone else as an intuitive, you don't want to be as a client giving your power away to them. You're going to them to kind of sometimes we can't massage our own backs, so it's the same thing with intuitive work. You're kind of going to get clarity or guidance, not for someone to accuse somebody in your life of something you're having a fear story about. The real question is why don't you trust that person? And how can you communicate better with them? What is how, why are we drawn to these unhealthy experiences in the first place? Can we work on that? So I think there's
Probably not, no, probably we cannot work on that.
right. So let's go a layer deeper here, I'm not a 1-800 psychic kind of person, and I think we've got to be careful of that type of reading.
Mm,
That's not what I do, and I think people need to be cautious of that.
and you sort of came up with your
Mhm.
own scaffolding of what's ethically and philosophically sound there, right?
Yeah, I have a list of ethics, and I teach a list of ethics in my tarot class.
Yeah, well, that's another vote towards how many cult leaders have a code of ethics that, that's actually ethical, right? So people who this is a callback to the earlier conversation around spotting people who are legit, right? Like you spend time fussing over these ethics. That's a good sign, right?
Yes. Yeah, and there's been times where I've had to say no, or, "Hey, this isn't my field," or, "Maybe you should go talk to this other person," and that you have to be okay with that
So yeah,
as a reader.
okay. So I kind of caught you off guard mid track on the illusion, the four eyes and stuff. If you were getting through, yeah, was instinct versus intuition and
Yeah, yeah, we were on stories, and so
oh,
I
we're
was
on.
saying, yeah, illusion or stories is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's different from intuition, right? It is something that we're creating that then we are projecting onto our life situation, or it's a myth that we're creating to understand something in our life. We all have these myths that we need to kind of hold the fabric of our life together. That's fine. It's just different from intuition. Intuition is kind of more like when you're a bit of the empty vessel and it moves through you or comes to you or arises
Yeah,
rather than creating something and then projecting it.
yeah,
So there's a subtle different feeling in the body when you're really listening to your intuition as to when you're creating a story.
yeah. Well, I just have to stop you for a sec because you said you can't sometimes scratch your own back. So I actually bought this J-hook device that I am actually able to now scratch my own back. So I can
Yeah.
send you the Amazon link.
I have one of those, but I was saying
Okay.
massage, like the difference between rolling on a foam roller
Okay.
and getting an actual
Yeah.
home massage.
Yeah.
Some we do need each other for reflection sometimes.
Yeah.
If you're going to nobody's like I'm not perfect either. If somebody comes to me, I would say, "Look, this is an art. Intuitive work is an art. It's not an exact science, but my intention is to really help people find clarity. Going through these, do we want to continue with
Yeah.
the
Let's
four
definitely
eyes?
get let's definitely finish the four eyes because I really love
Okay.
that framework and I love the symmetry of it. I was an economics. If you study economics as an example, like they find ways to create symmetrical models of the world. Like, I
Hmm.
love the symmetry of it that you have.
Yeah. So
There's a bit of a yin yang element of like, it's not bad, it's just yin yang, right?
yeah, exactly. And I think very well put. And so, your intuition is simply defined as your capacity to listen. So that's more yin. It's about being able to listen and having the sense of perception that helps you navigate your life. Illusion is more of an outward movement, or story is more of an outward movement where you're creating something and then putting it upon a situation. So the second two that I would go over is instinct versus impulse. So we all say, "Hey, listen to your gut." And that's a common one. What's your gut has its own intelligence. That can most of the time be accurate, but it can be tricky because old traumas can kind of interrupt that. Or, if somebody's grown up with an abusive parent, they might actually be attracted to the abusive partner, right? Because it's familiar. So sometimes that instinct can get tricky,
Distorted.
but it's right, but it in general, it's supposed to be here in the stomach saying, "This is safe," or "This is not safe." It's our animal intuition, right? It's basic safe, not safe mechanism, right? So our body when it's functioning well, when our psychology is functioning well, it should tell us pretty quickly, "Stay away from this situation," or, "Ooh, your boundaries are being crossed," or I don't know why, but no, right? Or the opposite. Wow, my instincts are feeling I'm so open, I'm feeling so safe, I'm feeling so expansion. My inner child is really feeling at ease here. So
I
that's instinct.
That's one what you said, the phrase of like, "I don't know why, but no." I think that's a mega learning opportunity, and for me, for cerebral people, analytical, like you if you want a way to explain it, that's okay. You might not have it to the degree that you want, but you have to be able to trust that just your feeling, your gut, your into whatever it is signifying that this is not safe, this is not the right decision, whatever it is, without surpassing the threshold of art information and ways
Mhm.
to explain it. I think that's a master skill that I've been
Yeah.
looking at of like I can't explain it, right? I'm doing this podcast stuff. People are like, what is this podcast? It's like there's levels to this that I really can't explain, but I feel called to do it.
Mhm.
I definitely will explain it to you after the fact. That I can promise you. But
Yeah, I mean, why is somebody that I really am not in the online world that much, why did I say yes to you?
right.
You invited me to do this, and I'm like, "Okay, check my instincts. This is a
We
yes.
we
Alright."
still don't know. We still don't know what we agreed.
But it felt right, and I say I trust myself enough to know when something is a no, and make I don't know why, but no, and I've said no to other people that have invited me to do podcasts, and I'm like, "No, it doesn't feel right. Sorry." So we have to that's tricky because sometimes avoidance can also be near old fears, things we need to get past. But again, track it, keep a journal. Just like anything, if you if you discover it, if you take time to practice it, if you take time to be with it, it becomes a skill that you can hone, right?
You keep zooming in on the granularity and get, like, more and more pixelated resolution
Sorry.
of oh, no, 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 I'm saying it's an analogy of, like, when you hone when you when you track, you are refining your sensitivity
Mhm.
to the impulse, the intuition, and so you're effectively increasing the granularity and resolution. That's how I think about it of what you're saying, right? It's not just like one giant weird feeling. Now you have more sensitivities to explain and feel in different levels of it.
Exactly. So, we'll get to this at the end. I'm going to give you an exercise that you can do in your tracking. But the last one is impulse. And this one's really hard because I think impulse control is challenging. This is the I want to or I don't want to. It's driven by desire. So if you track or tune into a teenager or someone from like teens to early 20s, their impulses are probably going to be overriding some of their sense, right?
Mm.
And so our inner teenager self that's like, I just want it. I just want all those chocolates even though I shouldn't eat them, or I just wanna, have intimacy with this person even though I know it's not a good idea, or,
My bad.
um we've all done it. So, sometimes I've noticed people think it's their intuition, but it might even be some kind of impulse that may even be sort of manic. I just feel like I had to, and I don't, it's driven from a different part of our center than from a different part of our system than intuition. So that one's tricky, and especially if someone has impulse control issues, it could, it's about kind of like catching those addictive behaviors, or catching where pleasure becomes something that traps us into unhealthy situations. Look, they're not always bad things. Sometimes we do impulsive things that can lead to adventure, a new experience, or risk taking that can help us to grow. But we just, again, don't want to mistake it with intuition.
So to sort of manage the yang of these, so with the impulse, for example, being a tricky, you kind of say step one, register for what it is, like build the awareness of what it is, or how would you guide someone towards
Is it,
not letting the
yeah.
impulse derail their life?
Well, where is this coming from in myself? Does this feel like a desire? It's desire. Impulse is fueled by desire.
Okay.
So if we're pleasure seeking, that is a desire, it's desire based.
Okay.
We're all human. We all have needs. It's okay to have pleasures. But if you have this sense that you're not able to control it, you're not able to have that inner parent or that inner wisdom come in to say, to give temperance or pause, and to step back and observe for a minute and look at it from a few different angles. Or to maybe you have a really great friend that really knows you and you can kind of check it with a couple of those people and say, I know I have this pattern. And so I think sometimes it's just really important for us to pause and say, all right, let me check this with these other parts of my system. And that's the last thing I want to share here with these is some practices on how to tune into our intuition rather than some of these other things, right?
Sure. I got your list of like suggested practices for owning your intuition. Is that uh
Yeah, and developing it. Okay, so here's a simple one that you can do every day. If you write down a question that you have, and let's say you want to bring that question to what you might say is your higher self, your wise self, the part of you that came in to this world with a blueprint of what you were going to experience. Okay? Or came in with there's a part of you that already knows. It really does. Okay? And so if you can sit with that question, create a nice safe space for yourself. Imagine yourself in a protected space, like whatever your version of your own temple is, energetically or literally. And then just get really quiet. No thought, no story, no projection, no, just nothing. Just get into stillness. Right. And see if you can use breath, sometimes a column of light through every system, energetic system has this like central align channel aligned. So getting that central channel aligned, like a tree trunk moving through your system or a column, breathing up and down that central channel, and then just listening, create space, create, like you said, yin, receive from that place. And it should be like a little glimmer of 3 to 5 words, or a feeling, or you might hear something, you might smell something, you might have a flash visually, and then just write that down, whatever it is. Or sometimes people will pull an oracle deck card and then observe. How does that, don't assume it's true, just observe it. Is it helpful advice that's coming through? Is it wise advice? Does it feel like something that's guiding you? And then watch how that shows up in your life. Observe it for a while. You can also do this with nature. Nature has all kinds of wisdom for us. It is marvelous. And so you can take a question and go for a walk. No podcast, no headphones, no getting on your phone. You shut all the technology off and then just be ultra present with receiving what is around you. So it could be a tree or a flower or the water, something's going to catch your attention. When it does, just sit and observe it for a while. Just listen to it, watch it. It might have a little message for you or some kind of wisdom for you. So those places where we can get to silence, where we can still the mind, where we can again become sort of that empty vessel and be in a receptive place, that's where intuition usually shows up. And then again, track it, check it, make sure it's not just something you're making up. So the imagination will be a vehicle for some of these intuitive things. That's okay, but again, there's gonna be proof. I have so many amazing stories about people, my own intuition, people sharing their intuitive stories, and each one of them, there was a specific energetic or body signature for them about how that felt. So the more you, again, like, keep tracking how this feels, and you'll be blown away. You'll be like, "Wow, I heard that, I felt that, I saw that, and there it is. It happened." Right? That's how you learn it.
I love that. Yeah, it's really building a relationship with yourself, slowing down, getting a handle on your emotions is a bit too generic of a word, but really sensitizing yourself to your own system. Like you said, different energetic signatures, different feelings. Where does it show up? Really get curious at that. But you're not going to be able to hear it, feel it, see it if you're scrolling on your phone, right? So it's like you need space to kind of slow down a bit, which everyone loves
Yes.
to do.
Yes, right, slowing down, getting quiet, finding your
Easier to do.
practice.
It gets easier to slow down every year.
Yeah, and
That's
it's
why we're doing this podcast because this is like a master skill that you can't just, you know. Ironically, this will be clipped into a reel, but you really can't do this stuff like bouncing through reels. Like you have to have space for yourself.
you can learn the different parts of your brain. I really think that intuition is not a supernatural thing. It's a natural thing that we all carry and that we all have it, and we just didn't get taught at a young age how to recognize it and use it. I had the advantage of my mother teaching it to me at a really young age, so I think that I just carried it with me my whole life. I didn't always listen to it like everyone, but it was there. So it's a skill that we can learn just like anything. If you work out every day, your muscles are going to get stronger. This is a muscle that gets stronger. This is a part of your mind that can get stronger if you practice it.
So you think everyone has potential to tap into this? What would be,
Absolutely.
what would be like a fun showcase example for you of someone, say, you've worked with and you've helped them train, own, harness their intuition, and now they're, this, and this happened. Like, what would be like a fun story? Well, like a before and after kind of, lost 50 pounds, weight loss kind of before and after.
Gosh, I'll have to think about that one for a minute. Gosh, there's been so many people that I've trained over the years with their intuition, and I would say one of the most important things is that everybody's intuition will show up in a slightly different way. There's just been several people that I've trained that maybe started out with some gifts and they knew that they had gifts and intuition, but they just hadn't quite developed it yet. And by either going through a program with me or level 1 and 2 tarot class, or by coming to a retreat and getting sort of these little tools that they then can start initiating into their lives, I've seen people leave their career that they hate and kinda honor these gifts and then develop a practice being an intuitive or a medium or a tarot reader, and kind of finding their own way to do it as well, adding it into other skills that they have. And so I have, there's several people that I can think of where I'm like, wow, that person really, I just gave them the encouragement to listen and trust their own gifts. And then they became, intuitive practitioners. So that's one example.
Wow.
there's these miracles like that that happen. Watching that unfold, it's just such an amazing feeling.
That's what got that's one of the things that gets me so excited about this whole esoteric realm, because I started writing down I was very skeptical, I mean, skipping a lot of stories and details, like, I was very skeptical about this stuff coming in, but over the years, I've witnessed, either from people I know directly, in real time as they witness things like, "Oh, so and so is gonna text me," and then boom, they do. Or I
Uh-huh.
even have my own list that I've personally experienced of things that are just mathematically beyond coincidence, right? I just don't
Yeah.
believe I kinda say I don't believe in coincidences because I think things really do happen in strange, to me, strange, quite literally awesome, like, it inspires awe, and it's just a miracle, like, it renders me in a state of, like, I'm just in awe that this happened, and, that's to me is the fun and the magic of it, that I literally just have a list of enough things to where I reached my critical threshold of there is something here. I don't know, I don't know if it's quantum physics, quantum entanglement. I don't know if is it God speaking through? I don't know exactly all the things, but I just know categorically this is
Mhm.
like a non-negligible. This is like there's something here. And I don't
Mhm.
know where the limits are, right? So if you can predict someone texting you, that's a cool party trick. I don't know the limits of what it can do. It's just so fascinating.
Yeah, I think the more you gather those stories and hear other people's stories, you start to say, "Oh, wow, there really is something to this." Um, there's different theories, so when someone comes to me and they say, I always ask them, well, what's your version of the divine? Is it God? Is it universe? Is it goddess? Is it your higher self? Is it, the life within us, the us within life? What is it for you? And whatever that is, that thing that, all life is connected. I think that when we go to that place and we're able to receive it and tap into it, the mind is this amazing tool that can an you know, chemical, I don't know if I'm saying that right, organ that can perceive anything. And so when we stop putting limits on the mind, you say, "Where's the limits?" What if you didn't put any limits on it? And had fun with that and played with that and then tracked that, like that's why the tracking tools are there because some amazing stories might come through and maybe they're true, maybe they're not true, but if you can start to gauge it more like is this healthy or is this unhealthy or where are these things that are coming through bringing me in my life, you start to see where that skill of limitlessness is valuable as long as you have some way to categorize it for yourself and try and again be aware of know thyself, right? That's the first law in any mystical study is know thyself. And that's as we're on this hero's journey, that's the whole point of the hero's journey, right? Is to know all these different aspects of self. And so I get to this place where like intuition's a part of that.
How would you so I'm sure you know plenty of other people that do similar things to you, on some level, I'm sure you're in this universe. How would you say you're different, or I mean, you could put on like a sort of a business, like here's my competitive differentiator. That's sort of like the business way to ask it.
Sure.
But I'm genuinely interested in, do you feel like your approach, like other people don't emphasize the tracking, or you came up with the 4 eyes, so you lean more on that? Like, how would you kind of, because I'm like, you can answer it as like a business answer, but I'm more curious just in the world of people who do this stuff, what distinguishes you in how you think about it, how you approach it, maybe it's your code of ethics. I know, like,
Maybe I
no,
need to get coaching from you for that.
there's, well, Well, you
Business
could
stuff is not my strong suit.
but I think you could honestly just reflect on the other people that you know who do this, and I'm sure you can spot differences in how you do it versus how other people do it. I'm just so like, there's gotta be some big I know there's a big spectrum in this world. That much I
Well, somebody I can highlight someone I really admire out there who does things I think maybe differently than I do. I really like Lee Harris. I don't know if you've heard of him.
you
He
should, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he has a big platform. He's someone a little more well known than I am, and he channels these guides called the Z's. Now, whether those are archetypal voices that he works with within himself or whether actual guides, who knows? But the information that he channels for the collective, for humanity, is often very valuable. And I love the way that the grace that he carries and this sort of solidity that he carries in his presence, right? And he just strikes me as somebody that I'm like, I could get along with this person, there's this sense of kinship there,
I
even
don't
though I
hate
don't
you.
know him. Yeah, I like this person. But that's very different channeling for the collective rather than channeling for an individual. And I think the thing about me is I really try to meet people where they are without judgment. I come in with my heart. I really care about people and their well-being, and my devotion is to giving wisdom. And so I combine the logical coaching techniques with the intuitive and try to bring a little bit of both. My goal is for that person to leave feeling like, okay, I am at peace. I feel a little more clear. I feel a little more settled. I have a sense for, if I got all tangled up in something, I've knotted some of those things. So I feel like I come with a lot of compassion and I'm able to I'm very adaptable. So I can adapt myself to a person's needs really well. And most people will say that about me that I meet them where they are.
Come as you are. Alright, well,
Yeah.
that's a good answer. So we did the 4 eyes, we did the archetypes of the charlatans, we did some practices to cultivate your intuition, we touched on your origin story. Any anything else you want to leap
Yeah.
into?
Yeah, I want to give a list for we talked about unsafe things, right? Now I want to talk about safe practices for people that, I'm a seeker. I've tried all different things. So here's some things that I would recommend for almost anybody that I would say if for healing or for safe practices that a person can do for their own well-being. Okay.
Great.
So one is the tracking that I've come up with and gone over. I think that's good for everyone. The second one is creating a chart for yourself about your wheel of support or your wheel of allies, who's in your field and who do you need to kind of maybe push a little further out and seeing which areas are like, wow, I've got a lot of people that I play with, but maybe I don't have anyone to connect with creatively, and to start to see where those allyships are balanced. We are primates. We're not meant to be going this alone. And so it's really important
I
to have
thought
a
I thought we're
community.
AI. I thought we're AI.
No.
I'm not sure about some of us. There's some AI out there.
Yeah.
That person over there, I can almo all but guarantee is AI.
Right. So, do you have a healthy community, being able to consciously have tools for that? I think knowing your core beliefs and your home-based beliefs and defining those things, I think is important. What's home base for you? Always asking yourself, am I okay to do this? Whatever it is on your journey, am I stable? Am I okay to do whatever's being asked of me or whatever I think I should be doing to develop spirituality? Body scanning yourself. So sometimes tuning in, seeing just with mind body practice, like where the tension is in your system, where's the ache, where's the stuck energy, and working with breath work and mindfulness and to relieve those things. I think for example, Joe Dispenza does a lot of that kind of thing. Qigong or Tai Chi, wonderful techniques for developing calm and space and a relationship with your own system. Most yoga, I wouldn't say there's all different types of yoga and yogic paths, but I would say mostly being mindful and careful of what type is good for you, what teacher is good for you. Yoga is a really great practice. Altar work is like setting up a space in your home and then putting meaningful things on the altar that represent that home base for you or represent who you're
All my
you,
tchotchkes?
yeah, whatever it is, I have one right here and I've got some oils and stones and candles and a letter from my grandma who passed and, things I collect on my medicine walks. So having a little altar that you work with is to say it's a sweet, safe way to sit with yourself and your meditation, your intentions. Again, we talked about nature gazing. I think, creating a listening practice with nature. And if somebody is a really like more heady person is like, I'm not into all the wooey stuff, this one's especially good for them. Be in nature as much as possible. Go for those hikes, get out on the water, nature will bring you a lot of peace. Simple ceremony. So when it gets into ceremonies, we want to make sure it's aligning. Some ceremony is kind of wild. So not all ceremony, but simple ceremony. A death rites, like a funeral, is a ceremony. It's a way we say goodbye to something and it's cathartic. And so sometimes we need simple ceremony for saying goodbye to a certain phase in our life or a certain person that we're at the end of a journey with. Those simple ceremonies with the elements can be helpful.
What would be flush out the ceremony for me, what would that look like?
Well, usually you're trying to choose how you're working with the
Just gonna
elements.
I'm just gonna line up 30 funerals for everyone who's dead to me, basically.
Right. Gosh. So a real closure is a big one, right? So if somebody is in a relationship and they break up and they're still kind of wrestling with that, and they haven't had closure from that person or they haven't let it go, they're still kind of clinging on, then a ceremony to say, thank you for this time that I've had with you. I'm consciously aware that this chapter is over. And they might, create a campfire and write out a letter and then make an offering to the fire with some herbs and then put up their protection, their prayers, and then throw the letter in the fire and say whatever they need to say and then make sure the fire is obviously put out. I studied ceremony with this guy named Oscar McKimmey, who's the African Igbo medicine man. That the world of ceremony is big. It's an endless world, but it's an art form, really. It's a spiritual art form where you come up with something to help you process something that needs to be moved in your system or healed in your system. Even forgiveness work, forgiveness ceremony where if somebody's like, God, I have this really narcissistic, your field abusive parent, and I'm still so angry, and I'm holding on to that anger, there might be a process where they need to speak their truth, whatever, what would they have done in that moment where they were abused and let their system be overtaken. So that truth has to happen first. The anger has to be released first. But then after that, there can be sort of a forgiveness ceremony or a release ceremony. And forgiveness does not mean that we're dropping our boundaries. Forgiveness just means, I release you. I release this. I want to be free from whatever resentment that I'm carrying within myself. And that can go all the way back to even ancestors that have done awful things. A lot of times ceremony works with release, and then the opposite of that is proclamation. What it is that you're calling into your life? What is it that you're asking for, praying for? So ceremony covers, it's like a symbolic, artistic way to process things in our subconscious psyche. And there's definitely an art form to it. So yeah, I mean, gosh, that could be a whole podcast in itself,
No, yeah,
the
I mean, just, like,
ceremony.
simple ceremony, I just wanted a taste test on, like, you said bonfire, like, dress it up a
Mhm.
little bit, and then, like, just a little bit of
Yeah.
a easy, accessible way to do that.
I work with so you say, which element do I want to work with? What does that element represent? Like fire usually represents, release and transformation. So that's an easy one. If you can't get to, there's water, There's I do I studied water ceremony a lot. There's a lot you can do with water. So yeah, simple ceremony. I think what I meant by complex ceremony might be a 3-day event where you've got somebody guiding you through it and there's a lot of detail.
Yeah.
That's different than like I'm going to take 2 hours to just do some ceremonial work.
Okay.
Another one might be like there's this clay. I'll show it to you here. This is called Nuzu clay, right? It's an easy one. You crush it up. You could use eggshell powders. The white represents purity. You can put it in your hand like this and then just say the thing that you're wanting to release and you blow it into the bushes, and just that act of like, I'm blowing this away. I'm asking for purification for this thing that I want to let go of can be cathartic. For some people it doesn't work, but I think that can be a really beautiful way to process. The next one would be the oracle arts. Now, I'm not talking about getting complex. Again, there's a whole study to that. These days, we have so many simple oracle card decks where they have sweet little messages and you pull one or two little reminder cards a day with whatever system you like the best. That can be really sweet. An innocent way to check in with your intuition and recenter yourself. And then flower essences are kind of like a branch of homeopathy that's safe. You're not going to have harm from a flower essence. If it doesn't resonate with you, it just won't work. So that can, Bach flower remedies, I think can be a lovely way. And you could say, well, is this a placebo or is it real? Placebos are powerful. Why aren't we asking that? So even if it is a placebo, I think it's something that it's again that consistent acts that helps you kind of like check in with what your intention or your intuition is. And so yeah, those are, I mean, I could go on, but those are a few examples of like, you know what, maybe you don't need to go to South America and do an intensive ayahuasca retreat in order to uncover something. Maybe you can just do something kind of more in your daily practices. And I see that a lot where people get their fix from some really intense experience and then have this huge breakthrough. And then, maybe they're even a little more unstable after that, even though they're not seeing it. And then they come back and they're not integrating any practice into their life. I think the key is slow, steady, everyday practice.
Yeah. That's a big one, how to integrate. I think it's the hardest part. I think it's what gets left out the most. Everyone wants to have the blast off, but who wants to do the work after? Yeah, the integration is a big one.
Yeah.
I think we touched on some good things. Any other pillars you want to get into? Because that goes through the dock of all the way from the four eyes to the yeah everything in between down to the practices. Anything else you want to do on this round one?
Gosh, let's see. Let's see. I sit with that for just a second and see if there's anything else that I would want to say. I think in general, just I'll close with saying, oh, go ahead.
Just gonna make it like we'll take a 30-minute commercial break. No, I'm just kidding. Keep
Oh,
going.
yeah. I would say, just in general, I just want to encourage anybody who's listening to create space for your intuition. I think it's as simple as that. Where in your life are you creating space for some kind of intuitive practice, for some type of spiritual practice, and that it is not the way that television or these movies, sometimes will portray the oracle arts or portray intuitive work. And it's important to kind of push some of those myths, those kind of things aside and say, this is a natural part of myself. It is not supernatural. It is natural. It's okay for me to like put down the phone, put down the computer, put down my busy work day and just sit quietly for 10 minutes, for 15 minutes. If you can just create that space in your life for intuitive work, I promise it will be valuable. And then again, keep a journal and it's only for that. It's not for your emotional processing or your therapy session, just to discover that relationship with your intuition.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for doing this. Where can people find you? Any closing comments you want to make? And you don't have to say WW blah, like everything will be in the show notes and I'll jam a bunch of links in there for you so people can read up on you.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you, Brian. Really appreciate you and your ability to hold this very safe space for me to come out a little bit more as the hermit that I am, to share myself with the world. And so I really appreciate you. People can find me and all my work at Sage Sansone, SageSansone.com. That's my name.
Is that your original name or are you such a sage that you changed your name to Sage?
It's my original name.
Not be the first that cannot be the first time you've heard or thought of that.
Oh, name changes is a fun subject, but no, it's my original my I didn't grow up there, but I was born in New Mexico, and my mother named me after the way that the plant smells after it rains in the desert. And so we moved when I was 3. So I'm actually named after Sage the plant, not Sage the wise one, but, you know, I try.
Well, I'll take either. Sounds good to me. That's actually
Thank
a
you.
random side note, the way people's names affect like, people who have the name Lawrence are, like, 50% more likely to be an attorney because they have the law. It's, like, super crazy bizarre, but,
Yeah.
people are funny. It's a lot of it is subconscious. That's where I kinda started in the quasi-mystical realm of, like, realizing just how much of our behavior and entire life is subconscious. That's just mind-blowing to me, and then so I just keep getting deeper into these weeds. Well, thanks so much for doing this. I will definitely put everything together, show notes. Thanks for listening. Keep your eyes out, ears perked for more good ones. So, thanks again, Sage, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Good night.